So I don't know about you guys, but even as Christians, it seems like we have this tendency to focus on people's highlight reel as shown to us on platforms like social media. I get on Facebook, I get on Instagram or Twitter, and I see person after person communicating the amazing thing that God has done in their life. And it can lead to this place where unintentionally we begin to define success for our own life as what is being communicated on these platforms. Or we begin to read great biographies of saints, which is really helpful for getting a vision for what's possible with our life. But then we begin to look at our own life and call it unsuccessful unless we have the next great story. And we begin to communicate even to disciples that we're making that success looks like having another great story. And it means that we begin to overlook other parts of our life where we're saying yes to Jesus. So at the end of the day, we all are defining success somehow as disciples, but is it how Jesus defines success? Well, in John chapter 14, Jesus gives us a definition of how he defines success. He's meeting with his disciples in the upper room, telling them that he's about to leave, but he's leaving his helper, the Holy Spirit. And he says this in John 14, verse 23, he says, "If you love me, you will keep my word, and my Father will love you, and we will come and make our home in you." So he connects this idea of keeping his words with the fellowship or relationship with the Father. In doing this, he's defining success for us. I want to show you this simple illustration or tool that may be helpful for you in communicating this to your disciples. We have here a target. When you play darts, when you play a game that has a target involved, what it communicates to you is that the center of the target is defining success according to everything else on the target. In other words, everything is relative to that center of the target. So if this is 100 points, then out here is probably lower points. So it's all defined in relationship to that. Now, if we define the center of this target as being the next great story, the next great mountaintop experience, if it's only defined as these great stories with God or these great amazing things, then it means that everything else is considered less than, or we overlook it as being a part of the journey of growing to look like Christ. But if instead we begin to call the center of this target a yes for God, which is really what Jesus is saying here, as he's saying that my Father and I will come and make our home with you if you keep my words, then everything else begins to have a place in our growth, in our journey. So what that means is our yes for God, as we begin to hear his word, as he begins to speak to our heart, even if it's a weak yes, even if it doesn't look like more than us spending a minute with him in the morning. Maybe we just turn our heart to him or turn our attention to him in a minute. Maybe it's not 2 hours of prayer, but that can look like a yes, and that can look successful in God's eyes. We need to begin to see our lives the way that God sees them. We need to begin to take our eyes off of the way that the world would define success on social media and look for that yes. Because wherever we're saying yes to Jesus, that's a place where the Father and Jesus and the Holy Spirit can come and make their home in us. They can begin to connect with us, and that's how Jesus himself is defining success in this passage. So success in the kingdom looks like yes. Success looks like yes. So I want to encourage you that as you are being a disciple and as you're making disciples, begin to cast vision in this way. And one way that you can do that is as you gather with your disciples and as you share stories of what God is doing, make sure to emphasize stories in your own life where you're simply having a weak yes. You have to be vulnerable, authentic, and even places where you're making a move towards what God is saying in a simple way. That can communicate that the value for your disciples is not the next great story, but is the yes for God in the area where he is moving in your life. So I hope that's helpful, and I hope that you can begin to see that we don't want the world to define success for us. We want to define success by the way that God says in yes. Guys, I sure hope this has been helpful content, and if it has, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel and leave us a question, leave us a comment. We'd love to connect with you and talk with you more.